Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 30th day of the 6th month of the 16th year of Changi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Changi, Kyung And well, let's go see what's happening around the kingdom this morning. And right now, at the Chongpyeong, Tennessee, it is 70 degrees and mostly sunny. Today getting up to 90 degrees, mostly sunny and warm. Tonight, clear and humid, low of 67. Father's hometown in Cheongju, North Pyongan Province, in the northern part of the Korean Peninsula, North Korea today, but who knows about tomorrow. Currently 84 degrees. Wait a second. This isn't coming out right. 84 degrees. Okay, there we go. And mostly sunny. Tonight getting down to 71, humid, turning cloudy this evening, followed by low clouds late. Tomorrow, high of 91, very warm and very humid with a blend of sun and clouds. At the Chunhyung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 65. And today getting up to 88, mostly sunny, very warm and more humid. And then tonight, 69 for a low tonight, clear and humid. And then at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 74 and clear, 98 for a high today, very warm with plenty of sunshine. Tonight, partly cloudy and a low of 73. And at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, tonight getting down to 74. And then tomorrow, also 98, same as Texas. Very hot with sunshine, caution advised if outside for extended periods of time, 98. And then at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, also 98 tomorrow. But today, right now, it's 88 with a low of 77 coming tonight. The shower in places tonight, this evening. And then tomorrow, very hot, some sun, increasing clouds, occasional rain in the afternoon, and so forth. And what about Ilan? Ilan in Taiwan, currently 81 and getting down to 76 tonight. And tomorrow, 98, no. Maybe subtropical, but it doesn't have to be that hot. 90 degrees, just 90 degrees tomorrow for a high, mostly cloudy, occasional rain and a thunderstorm in the morning, followed by a thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon. All right, let's go to Father's Word. And I'm in the book on the true parents. And here's chapter 2, section 2. The Messiah is the true parent. What kind of person is the coming Messiah? And again, I'm talking about a coming Messiah, right? And some people, Father's saying he's not the Messiah. Come on. Be real, all right? if he's not the Messiah and a future Messiah comes, what is that future Messiah going to do, right? It's all been done. All right. All right, so what kind of person is the coming Messiah? We talked about this several times already. Not only individuals, but also families, tribes, ethnic groups, nations, world, and cosmos will all believe in him and place their hopes and love in him. And he will be the embodiment, the substantiation of their belief, of their hopes, and their love. It is only when he stands in such a position that the faith that remains in history and human history can be substantiated, can bear fruit, actually, can bear fruit. And the hopes of human history can bear fruit, and the love in human history can bear fruit. Otherwise, faith, hope, and love cannot bear fruit. He's, of course, referring to Corinthians, right? Corinthians 13, 1 Corinthians. The words he speaks are not the words of an individual. All right, so praise God for the word that Leslie has given us this morning. Okay. And let's go and see what is happening. All right. And I wanted first to go to this one because I think this is pretty interesting, actually. Trump is going to take a trip today to the Federal Reserve headquarters. Yes, he's going there. He's going to the Federal Reserve headquarters today. And so I assume he's going to meet Powell. I'm sure Powell will not run away when he sees him coming. President Trump is visiting the Federal Reserve headquarters in Washington Thursday, a week after indicating that Fed Chair Jerome Powell's handling of an extensive renovation project on two Fed buildings could be grounds for a firing. Trump has criticized Powell for months because the chair has kept the short-term interest rate the Fed controls at 4.3% this year after cutting it 3 times last year. In other words, under Obama, he was cutting it leading up to the election. And you know, it looks to, well, it looks to everyone, I think, as though the Federal Reserve is trying to help Kamala Harris, you know, by cutting rates that are going to energize the economy, make it easier for people to borrow and for banks to lend and so forth, and, you know, bring down credit card interest rates, mortgage rates, and so forth. It looks like they were trying to help Kamala Harris. And then once President Trump comes in, they stop cutting rates. So it looks to, I'm sure it looks to Trump and a lot of other people as well, including myself, that the Fed is not a politically objective organization. Powell says the Fed wants to see how the economy responds to Trump's sweeping tariffs on imports, which Powell says could push up inflation. And President Trump is saying, well, you know, if that happens, then bring the rates back up, but you can cut them now. Powell's caution has infuriated Trump, who has demanded the Fed cut borrowing costs to spur the economy and reduce the interest rates the federal government pays on its debt. And this is probably the most important thing, because the government actually is the biggest debtor in the country. Obviously, they have $37 trillion, and something like 8 or 9 trillion has to get rolled over this year. In other words, it gets paid back, and then they borrow a new debt to cover the principal. So the federal government is having to pay unnecessarily high rates, especially because most of the federal government's borrowing is on the short end of the curve. You know, it's the 1 month, 2 month, 3 month debt that they are doing, and that's the interest rate that the Fed is able to control directly. And so President Trump is very angry about this because it's costing the government a lot of money, and it's increasing the deficit. The Fed has been renovating its Washington headquarters and a neighboring building, with some of the construction occurring underground, and as building materials have soared in price after inflation spiked in 21 and 22, the estimated cost has ballooned to about $2.5 billion from $1.9 billion. When asked last week if the costly rebuilding could be grounds to fire Powell, Trump said, "I think it is. When you spend $2.5 billion on really a renovation, I think it's really disgraceful," Trump said. Firing Powell would threaten the Fed's independence, which has long been supported by most economists and Wall Street investors. Well, and the irony is that if President Trump were to fire Jerome Powell, most likely that would make the demand for U.S. debt go down, and interest rates would spike. The demand would go down because there would be a perceived lack of independence, and there would be a perception that the Fed is being taken over by the executive branch of government. You know, this whole thing about the Fed being independent was kind of a myth, especially a leftist myth. And well, we'll see. I'm sure there'll be more coming out. I think as the day goes on today, I'm sure that well, we'll see what the meeting produces today. Okay. All right. Now, let me see here. Where's that other story? Let's see here. I had another story that President Trump is expected to possibly visit China. Here's Reuters. Okay, let me look at this one. I don't know if this was the one that I was planning on, but look at the Reuters story. Trump may is an important word, right? Trump may travel to China to meet Xi in the not too distant future. And this was updated yesterday. US President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that he may visit China soon for a landmark trip to address simmering trade and security tensions between these superpower rivals. President Xi has invited me to China and will probably be doing that in the not too distant future, Trump told reporters in the White House Oval Office. A little bit out, but not too distant. And I've been invited by a lot of people, and we'll make those decisions pretty soon. Okay, so we'll be waiting for that to come about. Trump and Xi's aides have discussed a potential meeting between the leaders during a trip by the U.S. president to Asia later this year, Reuters has reported, citing two people familiar with the plans, and that's the the APEC meeting that's being held in Korea in the autumn, late October, early November. While plans for a meeting have not been finalized, discussions on both sides of the Pacific have included a possible Trump stopover around the time of the Asia-Pacific Economic Conference, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea, or talks on the sidelines of the October 30, November 1 event, the people said. Another possible trip would be for a September 3rd Beijing ceremony commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, which Russian President Vladimir Putin also plans to attend. Yeah, that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. Going to Beijing, especially September 3rd, is a bad idea. They're going to have a big military parade then, and back in 10 years ago, when the South Korean president visited China to attend that parade, the U.S. Expressed unhappiness. They were not happy that Park Geun-hye chose to attend that parade. So President Trump attending it this year would not be very wise, I think. Meetings between Trump or Xi or Putin would be the first face-to-face encounters between the men since Trump's inauguration on January 20th for his second term in office. The White House and the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry have declined to comment on the Reuters report. And Trump made a comment about meeting Xi during a meeting with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., a key Pacific ally who Trump said he had nudged away from China. The country was maybe tilting toward China for a period of time, but we untilted it very, very quickly. Trump added, I don't mind if he gets along with China because we're getting along with China very well. Marcos, who took office in 2022, has for years sought U.S. support as his country's maritime disputes worsened with China. Manila has sought to avoid direct confrontation with its larger neighbor, which claims most of the South China Sea as its own territory. The U.S. and the Philippines have a 7-decade-old collective defense treaty, potentially implicating Washington in a clash between China and the Philippines. Washington sees Beijing as its key strategic rival globally. Upon taking office, Trump launched a tit-for-tat tariff war with China that has upended global trade and supply chains. Other points of friction between the countries include China's support for Russia, the illicit opioid trade, China's growing pressure on Taiwan, and exit bans on some American residents. Yeah, Actually, a executive of Wells Fargo, a U.S. citizen, has been told that he cannot leave the country, and also a U.S. government worker who does work in copyright issues has been told that they cannot leave the country. Yeah, yeah. Well, copyright issues in China. That's a pretty sensitive issue, isn't it? China likes to ignore copyrights. Uh, uh, in recent weeks, Trump has sought to lower tensions, describing his personal relations with Xi as healthy. Trump has sought to impose tariffs on virtually all foreign goods, including both China and U.S. allies in Asia like Philippines. He says this will stimulate domestic manufacturing, but critics say many consumer goods will become more expensive for Americans. The president has called for a universal base tariff rate of 10% on goods imported from all countries, with higher rates for some. Imports from China have the highest tariff rate of 55%. Trump has set a deadline of August 12th for the U.S. and China to reach a durable tariff agreement. Okay, well, yes. Well, we'll see what happens with those tariffs. We'll see how much of the increased cost will be eaten by either the exporter or the importer, or some other stage in the supply chain. We'll see what happens with that. And that's wrong table there. See if it. Okay. There you go. Gotta be. Okay. There we go. Okay. We're back. Okay. All right, and let's see here. So President Trump met with Xi Jinping. Very interesting. I'd like to volunteer as the translator, except like now the camera again. My goodness. Come on now. Settle down. Might have to switch it to the other side. Maybe that's what I should do. Let's import from this. Change it over here to this. Oops. Oh, on this computer, I only have, is that a kind of a port is that? Oh, it is. Okay. All right. Good. There we go. All right, let's see if that works better. Okay. Oh, no, it doesn't. Here we go again. Oh, we're back. Okay. Very sensitive. Yes, can't be throwing my arms around. Okay. All right, let's see here. All right. And let's see here. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping right now is meeting with visitors from the European Union. He's meeting with Ursula von der Leyen and also the European Council President Antonio Costa at the 25th EU-China Summit, State News Agency Xinhua said. Right, okay. All right, and let's look at this one. Okay. Well, before that, all right. Well, I guess we have to cover the coup. I'm not too excited about covering this story because I'm afraid it's going to be a distraction. And not to take away from its importance, a former president trying to pull off a coup like this is certainly important, but we need to keep our eye on the ball. And the ball is the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, that's the most important thing. And I'm just concerned that this is going to distract from that. But anyway, things are happening here, so here says that Gabbard, she's the director of national intelligence, who produced a lot of documents, and she turned it over to the Department of Justice. And she is saying the Department of Justice will investigate Obama on 2016 coup. But Pam Bondi, who heads the Department of Justice, is not saying that. So that's we got to keep that in mind. So we're not getting this directly from Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. Instead, we're getting it from Tulsi Gabbard, who may be, expressing her hope rather than objective fact. But anyway, let's see what's going on here. Former President Barack Obama will be the subject of a Department of Justice investigation on claims that he was behind the effort to stage a Russia-connected coup against President Donald Trump shortly after the 2016 election, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard said Wednesday. I will continue to refer these documents to the FBI to investigate the criminal implications, Gabbard told reporters during Wednesday's afternoon's press briefing, also commenting correct when she was asked if Obama would be investigated. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly points to the President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment, said Gabbard. There are multiple pieces of evidence and intelligence that confirm that fact. However, she stopped short of saying Obama should be investigated for treason. I am leaving the criminal charges to the Department of Justice, Gabbard said. I'm not an attorney. But as I have said previously, when you look at the look at the intent behind creating a fake manufactured intelligence document that directly contradicts multiple assessments created by the intelligence community, the expressed intent and what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and treasonous conspiracy. Okay, so she did work the word treason in there. Treasonous conspiracy against the American people, our republic, and an attempt to undermine President Trump's administration. Okay. Gabbard, when asked about a Senate Intelligence Committee investigation agreement that there was no political interference from Russia in Trump's race, said she is encouraging the media to examine the documents that she has released and for the American people to see for themselves what the documents contain. And it's true that she's working against, or she does have to sort of explain how it is that the Senate Intelligence Committee, with both Democrats and Republicans, supporting the conclusion that there was no political interference from Russia in Trump's race. So we have released now close to 200 pages and multiple references, multiple examples to include comments that have been made by senior intelligence professionals, some of whom are working within the agencies today, that confirm the conclusions we have drawn, said Gabbard. President Obama directed an intelligence community assessment to be created to further this contrived false narrative that ultimately led to a years-long coup to try to undermine President Trump's presidency. Earlier on Wednesday, Gabbard released documentation that the administration claims shows that reports regarding Russian President Vladimir Putin backing President Donald Trump in 2016 election were fake. She also refuted denials by Obama's camp in his alleged role in the matter. So we'll see what comes of this. The ball is, I guess, in the DOJ court, the Department of Justice court, and we'll see what they do with it. I have expressed skepticism, and I think I continue to be skeptical. And yes, it's evil, but not all evil gets prosecuted in the courts of the United States, right? The U.S. justice system is not a perfect system, and sometimes evil people get away, especially if they have good lawyers to help them plan their evil. And I'm sure that's exactly what the evil people in this situation did. Right? And I expect that all kinds of dirt is going to come out on Tulsi Gabbard or her family or something like that. Maybe she smoked marijuana when she was in high school or something like that. Some stuff is going to come out. This is how these people operate in Washington, D.C. and they will try somehow to undermine her or maybe to blackmail her somehow, either because they have something on her or someone she loves. And we'll see how this goes in Washington. But it's going to take a lot of courage, not just on her part, but on the part of many people around her. We'll see what she's able to do with this. Okay. All right, let's see here. All right, we can do this now. Klaus Schwab, yes, he retired, but gone but not forgotten. That he altered something as well, altered report to make Brexit look bad, according to reports now. The founder of the World Economic Forum has been accused of ordering the falsification of research to make it appear that Brexit was detrimental to Britain's economy. And we know how much the globalists tried to protect the EU from Brexit. And even now, they're trying their best to punish the United Kingdom for leaving. And the United Kingdom is having some difficulty as a result of that. But hey, listen, freedom is not free. And we really want to pray for the UK that they can pursue this Brexit situation. And recently, they came to a trade agreement with the United States, and I hope that they're able to prosper with that trade agreement. An internal probe conducted by the Hamburger law firm into the alleged misconduct of former World Economic Forum chairman and founder of the globalist Davos institution, Klaus Schwab, has reportedly found that the German-born economist orchestrated the manipulation of economic research to advance his political agendas. Yeah, so this just shows that we cannot trust these research or stuff like that comes out, because you got to look at who's paying for it. And unfortunately, it's also true on the conservative side as well. I always have to look at who, follow the money, as they say. According to the Swiss Sonntagszeitung newspaper reported by The Telegraph, the Great Reset architect is accused of personally intervening during the World Economic Forum's 2017 and 18 Global Competitiveness Report to ensure that there were no positive indications relayed about the British economy following the 2016 EU referendum. Then Chairman Schwab has claimed to have written a memo to WEF staffers saying that Britain must not see any improvement in the report and its rankings, lest they be exploited by the Brexit camp. Although the World Economic Forum report claimed that Brexit had not had any meaningful impact as of yet, he claimed that it will be by definition weaken the UK's markets. The paper ranked the UK economy as 8th most competitive country, down from 7th the previous year. A lot of people believe that, and they base their decisions on partly on the information from this, because they say, well, this must be a good report, right? But it's coming from the Germans. No. At the time, Brexit was far from being settled, with even discussions often surrounding the possibility of holding a second referendum to overturn the democratic mandate for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, with claims of economic calamity often being put up as justification. There was also widespread sentiment among globalists in Europe that Britain's withdrawal from the transnational bloc should be made as economically painful as possible, lest other EU nations follow London's lead in breaking away from Brussels. And I think they continue to do everything they can to increase the pain. Meanwhile, Brexit, alongside the first election of the President Donald Trump, were widely recognized as a significant blow to the World Economic Forum and the globalist project of Schwab. Yes, and I wasn't sharing that with you, was I? Okay, well, I apologize for that. But well, I don't know. I guess I was. Okay, I was sharing. All right. Okay. But the World Economic Forum is a typical example of these people. People who sort of continue the ideas of the European aristocracy, okay? That there has to be a group of people who are professionals in running things, running the country or running the world. And the peasants, you and me, you know, everybody else, should just leave everything up to the professionals, right? Just lead everything up to the professionals. If you want to, if you want surgery to be performed on your brain, you're not going to just grab someone off the street. You want a professional, right? So so the idea that people can govern themselves was the revolutionary aspect of the American Revolution in the 1770s, 250 years ago. 1776 will be celebrating the 250th anniversary next year. That was revolutionary then, and they're still fighting it. They're still fighting it. They're still fighting it. And President Trump represents the other side. And he is saying that, yes, people can govern themselves and people can give a mandate to someone like himself to give a mandate to the president. And then the president can carry out that mandate. And that's exactly what he's doing on immigration, on trade, on China, on the border, well, immigration, okay, on the border, but building the border wall, etc. And America's role as the world policeman, all those areas, he's carrying out what he promised that he would do during the election campaign. And of course, so they hate him for it. They hate him for it. And of course, in 2016 and 17, Obama did his best to mobilize his henchmen to undermine the Trump presidency. And now he's going to pay the consequences, right? He may not go to court. They may not be able to prosecute him. You know, there's a whole issue of presidential immunity involved here. So he may not be prosecuted. But even if he's not prosecuted, he will be disgraced, discredited, and his power within the Democratic Party and also among independent voters will be greatly diminished. So he will no longer be the General Secretary of the Communist Party in America, as I call him. That's not a formal position, but I think he is leading up the communist revolution or the attempted communist revolution in America right now. So the fight between President Trump and Obama is more than just revenge politics. It's a fight over whether America is going to remain a free country or whether it's going to be taken over by these European-style Schwabites, his successors. You know, the World Economic Forum is being run by his successors now. That kind of elite aristocracy, or shall we say, I don't know what, sort of the 21st century version of aristocracy, or is it going to be run by the people, And we will see how it works out. I'm sure President Trump will win, but it's going to get pretty messy in the meantime. And here, okay, let's do this one. Fed forecasts are politically biased, according to Scott Bessent. Okay, let's see what he has to say. And yes, I think he is correct on that. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Wednesday suggested, without evidence, there's that phrase again. They only use this against conservatives, don't they? And this is Reuters, okay. Without evidence. That the Federal Reserve's widely followed economic forecasts are motivated by politics as the Trump administration steps up pressure on the U.S. Central Bank to cut interest rates. That's their favorite catchword, right? Without evidence. You can state an opinion, all right? The Fed publishes something called a summary of economic projections, and it's pretty politically biased, Beston said, summarizing the projections as forecasts for 1 or 2 quarter-point interest rate cuts this year. President Donald Trump has demanded the Fed deliver an immediate 300 basis points, in other words, 3% lowering of the rate. So right now it's about, what, 4.3% or 4.25%. He wants it lowered to at least 1.25 and maybe even lower than that. The Fed publishes interest rate forecasts from each of its 19 policymakers each quarter and does not identify which policymaker made which forecast. In June, 8 projected 2 quarter-point interest rate cuts this year, 7 projected none, 2 saw one interest rate cut, and 2 saw 3. And generally, interest rates are cut a quarter point at a time, in other words, 0.25%. So if 8 projected 2 quarter-point interest rate cuts, okay, that'll be a total of 0.5%. 7 projected none, 2 saw 1 interest rate cut, so that'll be just 0.25%, and then 2 saw 3, so that'd be 0.75%. So President Trump is not having any of that, and so I think that's going to come up in today's meeting when he goes to the Federal Reserve and presumably meets with Jerome Powell there. I'm sure Powell will make time for him. All right, let's see what else is going on. I wanted to do this one. Because it's on the Ukraine and the possibility of some kind of peace in the Ukraine. But you know, what do you think? Ukraine's going to go on for a long time, I think. As I said, unless you know, either Zelensky or Putin pass from the stage of world affairs, one way or another, right? I'm not saying anything, just somehow if one or the other is no longer in charge of their particular country, then we might see a possibility for some movement on the ground in Ukraine in terms of peace. But I don't know. There's been some progress in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, but both sides need to be willing to come to the table and give something up to the end of the war. U.S. Ambassador to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Matthew Whitaker, said to Newsmax on Wednesday. And Ukraine apparently sent a peace proposal to Russia recently, but I don't think Russia has really responded, or at least not in a very serious way anyway. The previous 2 rounds of talks, while they didn't agree to a ceasefire, they have agreed to exchanging prisoners, exchanging bodies of fallen soldiers, and so there's been some progress, Whitaker told Newsline, ahead of a scheduled meeting Wednesday between Russian and Ukrainian officials in Istanbul to discuss ending the ongoing war. So I guess they did meet yesterday in Istanbul, Turkey. There's a framework to have these discussions. This is the 3rd round. I'm hoping, and I know that President Trump really wants a ceasefire and then negotiations that can get to a lasting peace. But, you know, both sides need to be willing to come to the table and give something up. This is not going to be advantageous to either side, but at the same time, no battlefield solution is available to either side. Russia is not going to win this war in the next decade if they keep fighting. And Ukraine obviously is going to defend themselves. Well, yeah, and I'm sure Putin is aware of the effects of the Afghanistan war, not our Afghanistan war, but their Afghanistan war. The Soviet Union's Afghanistan war had a significant role in the downfall of the Soviet Communist Party. When, you know, because a lot of soldiers were coming back dead, and it went on and on and on and on and on. I don't think it went on for 20 years, but it went on quite a long time. Let's see, it started during the Carter administration, so the late 70s, I guess. And when did it end? 96. It may have been 20 years. I don't know. Yeah, it could have been 20 years. We'll have to look it up. Anyway, so I'm sure Putin is aware that the Soviet Communist Party fell partly because of the effects of the Afghan war on domestic politics. And I'm sure he does not want that to happen again. This cannot be his Afghanistan. So maybe that will be a motivating factor for him to come to the negotiating table. I certainly hope so. But remember what Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, said, that China cannot allow, what was it? What was his wording? Cannot afford or cannot allow Russia to lose this war. So somehow Putin has to be able to say, I won. I won. But he's set his strategic objectives pretty high. He wants Ukraine to be non-NATO. Does not want Ukraine to join NATO. That's one thing. He wants NATO to be disarmed or neutralized, so the army or the military to be neutralized, disarmed basically. And he wants to keep all the territory that he's conquered so far, including, of course, the Crimean Peninsula. So I think he's going to have a hard time getting all of those things. And if he wants all of those things, he's going to have to continue fighting, unfortunately. And also, NATO has been saying again and again that Ukraine has the right to join any military alliance they want, and so they're not going to stop NATO. They're not going to stop Ukraine from joining NATO at some point in the future after the war is over. So, if there's a ceasefire or if there's a peace treaty, if the war ends, then the conditions for Ukraine to join NATO then are met. And Russia wants some kind of guarantee that this will not happen. We announced last week with our NATO allies and partners buying American weapons that can be used by Ukraine to defend themselves, especially the air defense systems that is going to allow them to sustain, if they have to, for years to come. But obviously, I think President Trump wants peace. He is a peacemaker, and he's brought peace in so many other places. I think the expectation is that parties can be rational and finally come to an agreement, he added. Well, we'll see. We will have to see. Yes, we will have to see what happens with that. All right, let's look at some other stuff that's going on. So, House panel, that's in other words, a committee or a subcommittee, votes to subpoena Bill and Hillary Clinton over alleged Jeffrey Epstein links. People, let's keep our eye on the ball, all right? Chinese Communist Party. All right, and let's see here. Let's see what all this stuff in Washington they said. Let's see. Anti-Israel activist tries to late Ozzy Osbourne for ignoring boycott. Okay, well, I'll bet a lot of young people probably never heard of Ozzy Osbourne. Anyway, different age, different time. Right. And here Gabbard is talking about her stuff. Okay. Trump exits the divisive UNESCO after body campaigns for global online censorship. Okay, yeah. Yesterday I wanted to see the reasons, and they really didn't give the reasons. Now I guess we find out. Tuesday, I guess that was, where I was trying to find out the reasons, right? So let's look at this. The administration of President Trump has announced on Tuesday that it would withdraw from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, a global body most commonly known for keeping a catalog of the world's most culturally significant places. Okay. UNESCO did, we know. Of particular note is an event in early 2023, months before former President Joe Biden undid President Trump's first exit from the agency, called the Internet for Trust Conference, in which UNESCO propaganda compared Internet users sharing political opinions it disapproved of to insects. It called for the repression of hate speech, misogyny, suppression of free speech, doxing, and conspiracy theories. And who decides what a conspiracy theory is? And what if conspiracy theories turn out to be true, right? The State Department listed among its reasons for withdrawing from UNESCO on Tuesday its proclivity for helping advanced divisive social and cultural causes. Advanced divisive social and cultural causes, as well as its strident anti-Israel stances, similar to those of many fellow UN bodies. UNESCO works to advance, and it maintains an outsized focus on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, a globalist ideological agenda for international development at odds with our American First foreign policy. Let's take a look at the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not something that we hear about very often, but these they call it SDGs, the 17 goals, right? Okay, and we're looking at the UN website here, 17 goals that we have here. And let's look at them here, okay? No poverty. No poverty. Okay, so right off the bat, you see that this is kind of a communist, Marxist-Leninist situation. Okay? They're using this kind of envy and jealousy as a way of advancing their agenda. And turning group, will there be poverty? Well, of course there'll be poverty. What did Jesus say? That the poor will always be with you, because you do not have equal outcomes. You don't have equal outcomes. Now, I think, in my opinion, poverty will be much less than what it is today. Why? Because government will be much less involved in the economy. The government will be much smaller, so families will be stronger, and families will have more resources to help out anybody within their family who's in trouble. If they fail if a business fails, for example, the family can provide a safety net for that person to get back on their feet. And when he gets back on his feet, then he repays the family whatever support that they gave him. So in that sense, I think there will be a lot less poverty, but you cannot say that there's going to be no poverty at all. That's just a Marxist foolish ideal. Okay. Zero hunger. Well, yes, I think there will be a more fair distribution of the world's food resources, because government interference will be less, and organizations like the United Nations will not be able to interfere. For example, Father started this fish powder situation, right? And people who were involved in the situation at that time have told me that it had to stop because the government came along and said, oh, your factory does not meet standards and da-da-da-da-da. Meanwhile, people are starving. Factory standards, come on, people are starving. Anyway, and good health and well-being, all right? Quality education. Well, again, they want centralized education. Gender equality. Aha. Of course, yes. Gender equality. Let's see. Father says that there is equality between the genders in love and respect and in satisfaction, I think you said. But that's the only place where there's equality between the genders. Clean water and sanitation. Okay, well, again, on a local level, right? On a local level. And affordable clean energy. Okay, we can certainly learn more about God's creation, and we can find out how to use the creation more efficiently and get our energy more cleanly. But again, we're not going to destroy the industrial base in order to do it. Decent work and economic growth. again, sounds like a Marxist, Leninist slogan, right? Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Well, okay, well, that's a good thing, yes. It sounds good anyway. Require or reduced inequalities. Again, Marxist, Leninists. They're talking about what? They're talking about race. They're talking about well, all sorts of things. Gender, I guess, and also they're talking about uh, income inequality and so forth. Sustainable cities and communities. Ah, okay. This is a tricky one, isn't it? They have their idea of the 15-minute city or the 15-minute community, where they want everybody to just live within a 15-minute walking distance for shopping, for schools, for work, and so forth. And I think this is already being executed in some places, including some places in the UK. We had an article about that one time on the King's Report, right? Where people are allowed to leave their 15-minute circle a certain number of times a year or something like that, and then after that they start getting fined or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but again, it sounds good, but it's a method of or means of control again. Now, compare that to the situation I'm living in here in Suwon, Korea, where actually in our case, almost everything is within a 15-minute radius, not walking distance, but at least by car. All right. There are all sorts of, even within walking distance, we have several schools. You know, we have kindergarten all the way up to K-12, K through 12. We don't have a university within 15 minutes, but we have banks. We have at least 3 banks if you include the ATMs. And we have all sorts of restaurants, all sorts of bars, yoga studios, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Baskin Robbins ice cream shop. Yes, yes, we have that. We have a Burger King. We have the no brand burger, you know, the one where it says it's good enough, why pay more? That's within 15 minutes. So, but that's organic, organic. No one's going to punish me for going outside of my 15 minutes circle. Responsible consumption and production. You know, this sounds like what Father's advocating for Chanuguk, but the difference, of course, is that they want to impose it from the top, impose it from the top. Responsible consumption and production. They want, so what that would mean, basically, that the government would own the means of production, or at least have heavy influence over the means of production, so as to make sure that it's responsible. Government owning the means of production, we have a word for that, right? Yes, we do. Communism. Communism. Okay, and then let's see, that's 12. And oh yes, we got a good one on 13 here. Let me show you this one. Climate action, of course, is 14 is life below water. Conserve and sustainable use of oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Okay, again, sounds good, just that they want to centralize it. Okay, and life on land, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. Again, they want to centralize it. Okay. Peace, justice, strong institutions. Strong institutions. That's the one. That's the one. Yes, the centralized institutions and partnership for the goals. Okay, so these are the what the UN has been calling sustainable development goals for how long now? It's been, well, let's see, let's go to the history. It's been at least 10 years, maybe 20 years since they did these. In June, yeah, 92. I think around then. Yeah, okay. So they've been going on now for more than 30 years with these sustainable development goals. All right, so that's what the sustainable development goals are, which the And this is one of the reasons that Trump is leaving the UNESCO, because they have an outsized focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, a globalist ideological agenda for international development at odds with our America First foreign policy, the State Department explained. And also, it's against democracy as well. And it's against the kind of organic development that you want to see. Sure, you want responsible production. Sure, you want responsible consumption. But you know how to do that? You know how to do that? It's by getting rid of Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics is a big problem. Keynesian economics wants people to consume, right? What we found that close to 70%, 70% of the US gross domestic product is consumption, personal consumption. That's just amazing to me. It's not, it's not manufacturing, it's not farming, it's not fishing, it's not financial services, it's personal consumption. And so we have an economic system where if consumption goes down, the people say, oh, the economy is going to hell. But that's the nature of Keynesian economics, that you want consumption, and also you want the government, if necessary, to borrow money in order to stimulate personal consumption. And politicians love Keynesian economics because it is the justification for government to spend. All right, so if you want responsible consumption and production, get rid of Keynesian economics and bring in something like the Austrian economics, something like that anyway. But the problem, of course, with that is that with Austrian economics, you're going to have deflation. Yeah. Because Austrian economics will give you a free market, and the natural state of free market is deflation. Think about it. Production, the process of production, will become more and more efficient as time goes on because of competition. And the more efficient the production processes become, and the more competition there is, prices should be going down. And we see that actually with computers, for example, right? Computers at one time, you had to be a university or some large institution in order to be able to buy one computer, because they cost millions of dollars. Today, right, we wear them on our wrist. I don't, but many of you do, perhaps. A couple of $100 will get you a computer these days. So that's an example of how the development of technology has reduced prices. And prices should be going down in other areas as well. But why not then? Why not? Well, because of Keynesian economics. But anyway, we're about out of time here. So let's just do this quickly here. All right, so that's why they left the UNESCO. Okay, so that answers that question that I had yesterday, or Tuesday, I'm sorry. All right, let's see here. Okay. Trump thinking about ending capital gains tax on home sales. Well, that's a big thing. That is a big thing. That will encourage more people to sell if they don't have to pay that tax. He's thinking about it. But if the Fed would lower the rates, we wouldn't even have to do that. So he's saying that, well, this is, so he wants to somehow to stimulate the economy. That's why he's thinking about this. That would certainly stimulate the economy. Yes. There's also talk about getting rid of capital gains on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies within a certain small limit, maybe a few $100s, something like that. So you don't have to pay capital gains if you use your Bitcoin or cryptocurrency to buy a cup of coffee or something like that. All right, I gotta go. Tomorrow is Friday, right? Yes, so I'll be here again. So I will see you then. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.